The silver blades sliced through the creature's neck like butter through warm bread. Black blood splattered across the cathedral's marble floor as the thing's head rolled to a stop near the altar. I wiped my knife clean on my sleeve and checked my watch. 12 minutes. Not bad for something that had been terrorizing Romanian villages for 3 months. Target eliminated, I spoke into my earpiece while stepping over the still twitching body. The creature looked almost human from the waist up, but its legs were those of a massive goat, covered in coarse gray fur. Definitely not in the Bible. Cardinal Whitmore's voice crackled through the receiver. "Excellent work, Boone. Return to base immediately. We have another situation." I packed my weapons into a leather briefcase and walked out of the abandoned church. The sun was setting over the Carpathian Mountains, painting the sky blood red. I'd been doing this job for 8 years now, ever since the Vatican recruited me from the streets of Detroit. Back then, I thought the worst monsters were the ones that walked on 2 legs and carried guns. How wrong I'd been. My motorcycle roared to life, and within minutes, I was speeding down winding mountain roads toward the private airfield. The Vatican's Special Division didn't mess around with commercial flights. When they needed their hunters somewhere, they got them there fast. 3 hours later, I stood in the basement of a building that didn't exist on any map, located beneath the streets of Rome. The room looked like a cross between a medieval armory and a modern military briefing center. Crosses and religious artifacts lined the walls, next to assault rifles and tactical gear. "Sit down, son." Cardinal Whitmore gestured to a chair across from a large wooden table. The old man's face was weathered like ancient parchment, but his eyes were sharp as broken glass. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room." I had heard that line before. It usually meant something really bad was about to happen. 2 days ago, our contacts in the archaeological community sent us this. The cardinal slid a photograph across the table. It showed what looked like a cave entrance carved into black rock. Strange symbols covered the stone around the opening. "Looks old," I said. "Older than Christianity, older than Judaism. This cave system was discovered during construction work in northern Israel. The symbols match nothing in any known language or religious text." Whitmore leaned back in his chair. "The construction crew went missing the first night, all 12 men. I studied the photo more carefully. The symbols seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them, but that might just be the poor lighting in the photograph. The Israeli government sealed off the area immediately," Whitmore continued. "But 3 more groups have vanished. A geological survey team, a military patrol, and most recently, a group of reporters who sneaked past the barriers. What makes you think this is our kind of problem? Because of what the survivors saw before they disappeared. I thought you said everyone vanished. Everyone except 1 person from each group. They all managed to escape and tell the same story before." Whitmore paused. "Before they took their own lives within 24 hours of getting out." A chill ran through the room, though the heating system worked perfectly fine. I had seen plenty of supernatural creatures, but something about this felt different, bigger. What did they see? Things that walk like men but aren't men. Things that speak in voices they recognize but couldn't place. And something else, deeper in the cave system. Something they couldn't describe without screaming. Whitmore pulled out a small recording device and set it on the table. "This is from the last survivor, a journalist named Cassidy Rivers. She recorded this message before she jumped off her hotel balcony in Jerusalem." He pressed play. A woman's voice came through the speaker, shaky and desperate. "My name is Cassidy Rivers, and I need to tell someone what I saw before I can't hold on anymore. We went into the caves around midnight. There were 5 of us. The first chamber was empty, just stone walls covered in those symbols. But when Jerry shined his flashlight deeper into the tunnel, we saw them." Her breathing got faster. They looked like people at first. A man in a construction uniform, a woman in hiking boots. but when they turned toward us, their faces were all wrong. Not broken or twisted. Just not the faces that belonged to those bodies. Like someone had taken a photograph of one person and pasted it onto someone else, but perfectly. The construction worker had my father's face. The woman had my sister's face. But I know my father is safe in Phoenix and my sister lives in Boston. The recording crackled with static. They started walking toward us and they were talking. In our voices. Jerry heard his own voice coming from the construction worker's mouth, asking him why he'd left his family. Rachel heard her mother's voice from the woman, telling her she was a disappointment. We ran. I felt my jaw tighten. I'd faced down werewolves and blood-drinking spirits, but something about hearing voices you recognized coming from the wrong mouths made my skin crawl. The deeper we went trying to find another way out, the more of them we saw, dozens of them, all wearing faces we knew but not on the right people. And then we heard it from deeper in the caves, something massive moving around, something that sounded like it was made of wet stone grinding against itself. We never saw what made that sound, but when it called to us, it used every voice we'd ever loved. The recording ended abruptly. Whitmore turned off the device. Every survivor tells the same story. Familiar faces on the wrong bodies, and something huge deeper in the cave system that speaks with the voices of loved ones. How many people are we talking about down there? Based on the survivor accounts, at least 40 or 50 of these creatures. Maybe more. Whitmore opened a file folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. Here's everything we know about the cave system. 3 main tunnels leading to a central chamber about 2 miles underground. The Israeli military tried sending in robots with cameras, but the electronics failed after about 50 yards. I studied the cave maps. The tunnels twisted and branched like blood vessels, all leading to one large central space. What's the plan? You go in alone, no backup, no communication once you're inside. These things seem to respond to group dynamics, feeding off relationships and shared memories. A lone operative might have better luck. And if I don't come back? Then we seal the cave with explosives and hope that contains whatever's down there. Whitmore's expression was grim. But Boone, you're our best hunter. If anyone can handle this, it's you. I had been hearing that line for 8 years. The Vatican's best hunter. The man who killed things the Bible forgot to mention. I'd earned that reputation by staying alive when everyone else died, and I plan to keep it that way. What kind of weapons are we talking about? Whitmore smiled for the first time since I had arrived. Follow me. We walked through a reinforced door into an adjacent room that looked like something out of a military contractor's wet dream. Assault rifles, combat shotguns, flamethrowers, and several weapons I couldn't immediately identify lined the walls. In the center of the room sat a metal case about the size of a coffin. Standard equipment, Whitmore said, gesturing to the walls of weapons. But for this job, we've prepared something special. He opened the metal case. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were 6 cylindrical devices about the size of beer cans. They looked like grenades, but instead of standard military green, these were silver with religious symbols etched into the metal. Holy water mixed with white phosphorus, Whitmore explained, blessed by 7 different cardinals and designed to burn at 3,000 degrees. If these creatures are what we think they are, traditional weapons won't be enough. I picked up one of the silver cylinders. It was heavier than it looked. What do you think they are? Something that existed before God gave Moses the commandments. Something that was never meant to interact with humanity. Whitmore closed the case. You leave in 6 hours. A transport plane will get you to Israel, and from there you're on your own. I spent the next 4 hours checking and rechecking my equipment. Silver core bullets for my pistol, a combat shotgun loaded with shells containing blessed salt, the 6 silver grenades, and enough rope and climbing gear to navigate the cave system. I'd learned long ago that preparation was the difference between coming home alive and becoming another casualty report. The flight to Israel took 8 hours. I spent most of it reviewing the survivor testimonies and cave maps. By the time the plane touched down at a remote airfield outside Jerusalem, I had every tunnel memorized and a strategy for dealing with creatures that wore familiar faces. A black SUV was waiting for me at the airfield. The driver, a thin man in his 50s wearing Israeli military fatigues, didn't speak during the 2-hour drive north. We passed through several checkpoints where armed soldiers examined my diplomatic papers before waving us through. The cave entrance was exactly as it had appeared in the photographs. A carved opening in black stone, surrounded by symbols that seemed to shift when viewed at an angle. Military barriers surrounded the area, and floodlights illuminated every inch of the rocky landscape. The Israeli colonel in charge of the perimeter handed me a radio. "This will work for about 50 yards into the cave," the colonel said in accented English. "After that, you're on your own. If you're not back in 12 hours, we blow the entrance." I checked my watch. 3 in the morning. I'd always preferred working at night anyway. Understood. I walked past the barriers and stood at the cave entrance. The symbols carved around the opening seemed to pulse slightly in the artificial light, but that might have been my imagination. I clicked on my flashlight, shouldered my equipment pack, and stepped into the tunnel. The temperature dropped 20 degrees within the first 10 steps. My breath came out in visible puffs, and the beam of my flashlight seemed dimmer than it should have been. The tunnel sloped downward at a gentle angle, and my footsteps echoed off the stone walls. After about 100 yards, I found the first body. It was one of the construction workers, based on the hard hat and orange safety vest. The man was sitting upright against the tunnel wall, eyes closed, with what looked like a peaceful expression on his face. There were no obvious wounds or injuries. I knelt beside the body and checked for a pulse. Nothing. The skin was cold, but not yet stiff. This man had died recently, maybe within the last day or two. That's when I noticed the face. It wasn't the right face for the body. The construction worker's build and clothes suggested a man in his 40s, probably Hispanic based on the work shirt with Spanish writing. But the face was that of a young white guy, maybe 25 years old. The features didn't match the body at all, like someone had performed a perfect face transplant. I had seen a lot of weird things in my 8 years with the Vatican, but this was new. I took a photograph with my phone and continued down the tunnel. 20 yards further, I found 3 more bodies. A woman in hiking gear with the face of an elderly man. A soldier wearing the face of a teenage girl. A reporter with press credentials whose face belonged to someone at least 30 years older. All of them sitting peacefully against the tunnel walls. All of them dead with no apparent cause. All of them wearing the wrong faces. The radio crackled with static. "Base to Hunter, do you copy?" I keyed the microphone. "I copy. Found the missing people. They're dead, but something's wrong with their faces." "Wrong how?" "They're wearing faces that don't belong to their bodies. I'll send photos when I get back." "Copy that. You're at the edge of radio range. Good luck." The radio went silent. I continued deeper into the cave system. According to my map, I was approaching the first major junction where the tunnel split into 3 different passages. The survivor account suggested that the creatures had been seen in all 3 tunnels, with the largest concentration in the central passage that led to the main chamber. I decided to check the left tunnel first. After 50 yards, I saw light ahead. Not electric light, but something that flickered like candlelight or torches. The tunnel opened into a small chamber about the size of a bedroom, and what I saw there made me grip my shotgun tighter. 20 people stood in perfect rows, like they were posing for a group photograph. Men, women, and children of all ages, all facing the tunnel entrance as if they'd been waiting for me to arrive. But their faces were all wrong. A A little girl wore the weathered face of an old man. A tall soldier had the face of a middle-aged woman. An elderly lady wore the face of a teenage boy, and they were all smiling at me. "Hello, Boone," they said in unison, but each voice was different. Some spoke in the voices of children, others in the voices of adults. One spoke in my mother's voice, even though my mother had been dead for 15 years. "We've been waiting for you." I raised my shotgun and took aim at the nearest creature, a man in a business suit wearing a child's face. "Yeah, well, the wait's over." I pulled the trigger. The blessed salt rounds tore through the creature's chest, and it collapsed backward with a sound like breaking pottery. Black fluid leaked from the wound, but the thing didn't scream or cry out. It just smiled wider as it fell. The other creatures didn't react to their companion's destruction. They kept staring at me with those wrong faces, still smiling. "You can't kill us all, Boone," they said together. "We know you. We know your fears. We know what you dream about." One of them, a woman wearing a man's face, stepped forward. "We know about Detroit, about the things you did before the Vatican found you, about Tommy Kowalski." My finger tightened on the trigger. Tommy Kowalski was a name I'd buried along with my past. A drug dealer I'd killed during my gang days, back when I thought violence was just a way to survive on the streets. "We know about your sister Kelly," another creature said, this one speaking in my father's voice. "About how you couldn't save her from the overdose, about how you blame yourself." "Shut up," I growled. "She's down here, Boone, in the deep chamber, waiting for you. She wants to see you again." That was enough. I opened fire, working the shotgun's pump action as fast as my hands could move. Blessed salt rounds shredded through the creatures, dropping them one by one. Some tried to run, but the tunnel was narrow and I was faster. Within 30 seconds, 20 bodies lay scattered across the chamber floor, all leaking that same black fluid. But as I reloaded, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Footsteps. Lots of them, coming from the other two tunnels. More creatures were on their way. I pulled the pin from one of my silver grenades and tossed it into the chamber. The holy water and white phosphorus mixture exploded in a burst of silver fire that lit up the entire space. The temperature spiked to over 3,000 degrees for about 5 seconds, turning the fallen creatures into ash and leaving the stone walls glowing red hot. I didn't stick around to admire my handiwork. According to the map, I needed to reach the central chamber to find whatever was controlling these things. The survivors had all mentioned something massive deeper in the cave system, something that spoke with familiar voices. Time to find out what that something was. The middle tunnel sloped downward more steeply than the others, and I could feel the temperature continuing to drop as I descended. My flashlight beams seemed to get absorbed by the darkness ahead, as if the tunnel went on forever. After what felt like an hour of walking but was probably only 20 minutes, I started hearing voices again. Not the chorus of creatures this time, but individual voices calling out from side passages and alcoves carved into the tunnel walls. "Boone, over here." That was my old partner from Detroit, Rico Martinez, who'd been shot during a gang war 12 years ago. "Son, I'm so proud of you." My father, who died of a heart attack when I was 16. "Help me, Boone. I'm scared." My sister Kelly, who died with a needle in her arm at age 19. I kept walking. I'd learned a long time ago that the dead stayed dead, and anything claiming to be otherwise was usually something trying to kill me. The tunnel finally opened into the central chamber, and I understood why the survivors had been unable to describe what they saw. The chamber was huge, easily the size of a football stadium, with a dome ceiling that disappeared into the darkness above. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols from the cave entrance, but down here they glowed with a faint blue light that provided just enough illumination to see. And in the center of the chamber sat something that defied easy description. It looked like a massive tree made of human bones, easily 50 feet tall and 40 feet wide at the base. The bones were fused together into a trunk and branches, but they weren't random bones. These were complete skeletons, twisted and woven together while maintaining their human shapes. Arms reached out from the trunk, legs formed the roots that spread across the chamber floor, and dozens of skulls clustered like fruit on the bone branches. But the skulls weren't empty. Each one had a face pressed against the bone, as if someone had stretched skin over the skull like a mask. And all the faces were moving, talking, calling out to me. "Boone, come closer." Kelly's voice, coming from a skull about halfway up the bone tree. "We've missed you, son." My father's voice from another skull. "The gang's all here, amigo." Rico's voice from a third skull. This thing had taken the faces and voices of everyone who'd ever died around me. Everyone I'd failed to save, everyone I'd lost, everyone I'd killed. They were all here, trapped in this bone tree, being used as bait. "Impressive, isn't it?" The new voice came from directly behind me. I spun around, shotgun ready, and came face to face with myself. The creature looked exactly like me, down to the scar on my left cheek from a knife fight in Detroit. Same height, same build, same clothes. But when it smiled, the expression was all wrong. Too wide, too knowing. "I've been waiting to meet you for so long, Boone. The Vatican's best hunter, the man who kills things the Bible doesn't mention." The false me walked in a slow circle around me. "Do you know what you're looking at?" "Some kind of collector," I said, keeping my weapon trained on the creature. "You steal faces and voices from the dead." "Close, but not quite right. I don't steal from the dead, Boone. I steal from the living. Everyone who dies in my presence, I take a piece of their soul. Their face, their voice, their memories. I've been doing it for thousands of years." The bone tree pulsed with that blue light, and all the faces trapped in the skulls began speaking at once. A chorus of voices from across human history, all calling out in languages I couldn't understand. "This cave system was built as a temple," the false me continued. "Long before your Christ walked the earth, long before Moses came down from the mountain. The people who built this place understood something that your Bible forgot to mention. There were things that existed before your God decided to create the world, things that were here first. And you're one of them. I'm the last of them. My brothers and sisters were destroyed when your God reshaped the world to his liking, but I hid down here, in the deep places, collecting pieces of humanity, learning what makes you tick, studying your fears and desires and loves." I backed toward one of the tunnel entrances, but found my way blocked by more creatures wearing familiar faces. At least 30 of them had emerged from passages I hadn't noticed, all staring at me with those wrong expressions. "The construction work above disturbed my rest," the false me said. "I was hungry. I hadn't fed in centuries. So I called people down to me, took what I needed from each group, and sent the survivors back up to spread fear. Fear draws more people, more faces to collect. What do you want with me?" The false me's smile got even wider. "You're special, Boone. You've seen more death than most people. You carry more guilt, more pain, more loss. Taking your soul would give me enough power to leave this cave, to walk the surface world again, to feed properly for the first time in 2,000 years." The bone tree pulsed faster, and the faces in the skulls began screaming. Not in pain, but in hunger. They wanted me to join them. I had faced down werewolves and demons and blood-drinking spirits, but this was different. This thing had been killing people since before Christianity existed. It had survived God's reshaping of the world. It had collected thousands of souls over the centuries. But it had made one mistake. It had threatened to use my sister's face and voice to manipulate me. Nobody did that and lived. I pulled the pins from all 5 remaining silver grenades and tossed them in different directions around the chamber. The creatures wearing familiar faces rushed toward me, but I was already moving, diving behind a cluster of bone roots for cover. The explosions came in rapid succession, filling the chamber with silver fire and the screams of dying creatures. The holy water and white phosphorus burned through bone and flesh alike, and the temperature spiked high enough to crack the stone walls. When the flames died down, half the bone tree was missing, and most of the creatures lay as piles of ash on the chamber floor. The false me was still standing, but my stolen face was melting off like wax, revealing something underneath that hurt to look at directly. "You think fire can stop me?" The creature's voice was no longer my voice. It sounded like grinding stone mixed with breaking glass. "I am older than your species. I watched the first human learn to make tools. I was here when your ancestors were still afraid of the dark." I chambered another round in my shotgun. "Yeah, well, you picked the wrong guy to collect." The creature lunged at me with inhuman speed, but I was ready. 8 years of hunting supernatural monsters had taught me that the old ones were always arrogant. They always underestimated humanity. The shotgun blast caught the creature's center mass and sent it sprawling backward into what remained of the bone tree. Black blood splattered across the glowing symbols on the walls, and for the first time since I'd entered the cave, I heard the thing scream in actual pain. "Holy water blessed by 7 cardinals," I said, working the pump action. "Turns out your kind really don't like the new management upstairs." The creature tried to stand, but its stolen form was falling apart. Pieces of face and flesh dropped away, revealing glimpses of something that belonged in nightmares. Something with too many teeth and not enough skin. "This isn't over," it gasped. "I'll find another way out. I'll collect new faces, My second shot took off what remained of its head. The creature's body dissolved into black smoke, but instead of dissipating, the smoke flowed toward the bone tree. The remaining skulls began glowing brighter, and I realized I'd made a tactical error. The thing hadn't been destroyed. It had just returned to its source of power. The bone tree began to rebuild itself, pulling scattered bones back together with invisible force. The skulls rearranged themselves into new patterns, and the faces trapped inside them started laughing. "You can't kill me in my own temple, Hunter." The creature's voice came from every skull at once. "I am bound to this place, and it is bound to me. As long as the tree stands, I exist." New creatures began emerging from the tunnel entrances, more than I had seen before. Dozens of them, all wearing faces I recognized from my past. Gang members from Detroit, Vatican priests I'd worked with, people I'd saved during previous missions. And leading them was Kelly, my dead sister, wearing her own face this time. "Hello, big brother," she said in her real voice. "I've missed you so much." I felt my grip tighten on the shotgun. This thing was using my sister against me, and I was almost out of ammunition. The bone tree continued to grow, spreading roots across the chamber floor toward my feet. Where the roots touched the stone, new symbols began carving themselves into the rock, glowing with that same blue light. "The temple is expanding," Kelly said, walking closer. "Soon it will reach the surface. Soon I'll be able to walk in the sunlight again, wearing all these beautiful faces." I backed toward one of the tunnels, but found my way blocked by more creatures. I was surrounded, outgunned, and running out of options. That's when I remembered something Cardinal Whitmore had said during the briefing. "If you don't come back in 12 hours, we seal the cave with explosives." I checked my watch. 11 hours and 47 minutes since I'd entered the cave. I had 13 minutes to either find another way out or figure out how to destroy this thing permanently. The bone tree pulsed with malevolent energy, and all the trapped faces began chanting in unison. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and I could feel something massive stirring in the depths below the chamber. Whatever this creature really was, it was just getting started. I had 13 minutes to live, and my dead sister was walking toward me with a smile that looked exactly like the one she'd worn on Christmas morning when we were kids. "Remember when we used to build snow forts in the backyard?" Kelly said, her voice perfectly matching my memories. "You always said you'd protect me from anything. Where were you when I needed you most, Boone?" "You're not my sister," I said, but my voice cracked on the words. Even knowing this thing was fake, seeing Kelly's face and hearing her voice made my chest tight. "I'm more your sister than I ever was when I was alive," the creature replied. "I have all her memories now. All her love for you. All her disappointment. Do you want to know what her last thoughts were when the heroin hit her heart?" I raised my shotgun, but my hands were shaking. 8 years of hunting monsters, and I'd never faced one that could get inside my head like this. The bone tree continued spreading its roots across the chamber floor, and where they touched, new creatures crawled out of the stone itself. Construction workers, soldiers, reporters, all wearing the wrong faces, all moving toward me with jerky, puppet-like movements. "She thought about you," Kelly continued. "About how you'd gone off to find yourself after Dad died. About how you'd left her alone with Mom's drinking and the bills and the drug dealers who kept coming around. She thought about calling you, but she was too proud, too hurt." "Shut up," I whispered. "She died alone, Boone. In a bathroom stall at some club downtown, with a needle in her arm and your phone number written on her hand. She'd finally decided to call you for help, but she ran out of time." The creature wearing Kelly's face was close enough to touch now. Behind it, dozens of other familiar faces pressed closer, forming a circle around me. Gang members from my old life, priests from the Vatican, people I'd saved during missions, people I'd failed to save. "Join us," they said in unison, but each speaking in their own voice. "Stay with us. You don't have to feel guilty anymore. You don't have to carry the weight of everyone you couldn't save." 12 minutes. I closed my eyes and tried to think. The creature was bound to this temple, but it was also feeding off the guilt and memories of everyone who died here. The survivors had all killed themselves within 24 hours because they couldn't handle what they'd seen. But what if the guilt was the key? What if the creature could only hold on to stolen souls as long as someone felt responsible for their deaths? I opened my eyes and looked directly at the thing wearing Kelly's face. "You're right," I said. "I did fail her. I left when she needed me most, and she died because I wasn't there." The creature's smile widened. "Finally, you understand. But that doesn't make her death my fault," I continued. "Kelly made her own choices. She chose the drugs. She chose to use alone. She chose not to call me until it was too late. I couldn't have saved her even if I'd been there, because she didn't want to be saved." The creature's expression flickered, confusion replacing the knowing smile. "Enrico Martinez got shot because he decided to deal drugs in enemy territory. And Tommy Kowalski died because he pulled a knife on me first. And all these people in the cave died because they chose to come down here after being warned it was dangerous." I started walking forward, and the creatures backed away. The bone tree's growth slowed, then stopped entirely. "You feed on guilt," I said, "on the assumption that someone else is responsible for every death, every tragedy, every moment of pain. But sometimes people die because of their own choices. Sometimes bad things happen for no reason at all. And sometimes the only person responsible for a death is the thing doing the killing." The creature wearing Kelly's face let out a shriek of rage and lunged at me, but I was ready. My shotgun blast caught its center mass, and instead of just knocking it down, the creature dissolved into black smoke. All around the chamber, the other creatures began screaming and dissolving as well. The bone tree started to crumble, and the faces trapped in the skulls began speaking in their own voices for the first time. "Thank you," they whispered as they faded away. "Thank you for letting us go." But the chamber wasn't finished with me yet. The floor began to crack and split, revealing a pit that seemed to go down forever. Hot air rose from the depths, carrying with it a smell like sulfur and rotting meat. Something massive was moving around down there, something much larger than the face-stealing creature. 11 minutes. You killed my servant, a new voice rumbled from the pit. It sounded like an earthquake given the power of speech. But I am not so easily destroyed. Tentacles thick as tree trunks began emerging from the cracks in the floor. Not the slick, rubbery tentacles of sea creatures, but things that looked like they were made of molten rock and burning metal. Where they touched the chamber walls, the stone melted and flowed like water. I am what your Bible calls the Leviathan, the voice continued. The chaos that existed before your God imposed order on the world. The deep that was divided so the land could emerge. More tentacles erupted from the floor, and the entire chamber began to shake. Chunks of stone fell from the ceiling, and I could hear the tunnels behind me starting to collapse. My servant collected faces and voices, but I collect entire civilizations. I have been sleeping beneath this land since the day your God cast me into the deep. The face stealer was just my way of testing the surface world, seeing if humanity had grown strong enough to interest me. One of the tentacles swept toward me, moving faster than anything that large had a right to move. I dove to the side and came up running, heading for the tunnel that led back to the surface. You have proven that some humans are worthy opponents, the Leviathan continued. Strong enough to resist guilt and manipulation. Strong enough to kill an ancient servant. This pleases me. The tunnel was collapsing behind me as I ran, but I had memorized the route during my descent. Left at the first junction, straight through the chamber where I'd burned the first group of creatures, then up the steep incline toward the cave entrance. 10 minutes. I think I'll rise to the surface and see what your species has accomplished in the last 2,000 years. The Leviathan's voice followed me through the tunnels. Perhaps you'll provide better entertainment than the civilizations I destroyed before your Christ was born. The tunnel shook again, more violently this time. Cracks appeared in the walls, and I could see lava-like substance seeping through the stone. Whatever the Leviathan was, it was big enough to collapse the entire cave system just by moving around. I reached the first junction and kept running. Behind me, I could hear the deep grinding sound of something massive forcing its way through passages that were never meant to accommodate it. The face-stealing creature had been just a scout, a small part of something much bigger and older. 8 minutes. The tunnel ahead was blocked by fallen stone, but I could see daylight filtering through the gaps. The Israeli military was probably already setting their explosives, getting ready to seal the cave whether I was inside or not. I pulled out my phone and speed-dialed Cardinal Whitmore's direct number. No signal. I was still too deep underground. 7 minutes. I started climbing over the fallen stones, using my knife to widen gaps just large enough to squeeze through. Behind me, the tunnel filled with orange light as the Leviathan forced its way closer to the surface. Run, little hunter, the creature's voice rumbled through the stone. Tell your Vatican masters what you found. Tell them the old powers are waking up. Tell them their God's protection only extends as far as humanity's faith, and I have seen how quickly that can be broken. 6 minutes. I reached the main tunnel and could see the cave entrance ahead, still illuminated by the Israeli military's floodlights. I started running again, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the cuts on my hands from climbing over sharp stone. The tunnel behind me erupted in flame and molten rock. The Leviathan was rising faster now, and the entire mountain was starting to shake. Trees were falling outside the cave entrance, and I could hear vehicles starting up as the military prepared to evacuate. 5 minutes. I burst out of the cave entrance and immediately started yelling at the Israeli soldiers. Get back! Get everyone back! There's something big coming up! The colonel in charge of the perimeter grabbed my arm. What did you find down there? Something that makes biblical demons look like house cats, I said. How much explosive do you have? Enough to bring down half the mountain. That might not be enough. The ground began to crack around the cave entrance, and steam hissed up from the fissures. The floodlights flickered and went out as their power cables melted in the rising heat. 4 minutes. I pulled out my phone. Still no signal, but I had one more option. The Vatican's emergency beacon, a device that could punch through any interference and reach the nearest Catholic church via satellite relay. I activated the beacon and spoke quickly. "This is Hunter to Vatican Control. Emergency authorization Omega Black. Request immediate airstrike on my current coordinates. Threat level Leviathan." Static filled the channel for several seconds. Then Cardinal Whitmore's voice came through, crystal clear. "Boone? What's your situation?" "The thing in the cave is awake and heading for the surface. It's not just some creature, Cardinal. It's one of the primordial powers. Pre-creation level threat. If it gets out, it won't stop with Israel." 3 minutes. The cave entrance exploded outward as something massive forced its way through solid rock. The Israeli soldiers and I were thrown backward by the blast, and when I looked up, I saw the Leviathan's true form for the first time. It looked like a mountain-sized octopus made of molten stone and burning metal, with dozens of tentacles that glowed like lava. But instead of a normal head, it had hundreds of faces embedded in its surface. Human faces, animal faces, and things that might have been faces from species that no longer existed. "Airstrike approved," Whitmore's voice came through the beacon. "F-35s inbound with bunker busters. ETA 2 minutes. 2 minutes. The Leviathan pulled itself completely out of the cave system and began moving toward the military perimeter. Where its tentacles touched the ground, the earth turned to glass. Where its body scraped against trees, they burst into flame. The Israeli soldiers were firing everything they had at the creature, but bullets and rockets just bounced off its rocky hide like pebbles. A few tentacles swept through their positions, and entire squads disappeared in bursts of superheated air. "All units retreat!" the colonel shouted into his radio. "Fall back to minimum safe distance!" I stayed where I was, watching the creature advance. It was heading toward the nearest town, probably drawn by the concentration of human life. Thousands of people were about to die unless those airstrikes arrived on schedule. 1 minute. The Leviathan had covered half the distance to the town when I heard the jets approaching. F-35 Lightning fighters, flying low and fast with enough firepower to level a city block. "Target acquired," came the pilot's voice over the beacon. "Multiple strikes inbound." The first bunker buster missile hit the Leviathan's center mass and exploded in a burst of white fire. The creature staggered but kept moving. The second missile took off 3 of its tentacles and sent black blood spraying across the landscape. The third missile punched through the creature's rocky hide and exploded internally. The Leviathan let out a roar that shattered windows for miles around. It began to collapse, its molten blood flowing across the ground and cooling into obsidian glass. The faces embedded in its skin screamed as they faded away, finally free from whatever had bound them to the creature. But as it died, the Leviathan spoke one last time. "This changes nothing, Hunter. I am not the only one who sleeps beneath the earth. My death will wake the others. They will come for your kind. And when they do, remember that you could have joined me willingly." The creature's massive form hit the ground with a crash that registered on seismographs 3 countries away. For several minutes, nobody moved. The Israeli soldiers stared at the cooling remains of something that shouldn't have existed, while I tried to process what I'd just witnessed. The Vatican's emergency beacon crackled to life again. "Boone, report status." I keyed the microphone. "Target neutralized. Repeat, target neutralized. But Cardinal, we have a bigger problem." "Explain." "This thing wasn't alone. There are others like it sleeping underground, and killing this one might have woken them up." Silence on the channel for almost 30 seconds. Then Whitmore's voice, grim and determined. "Come home, son. We have work to do." 2 hours later, I was sitting in the back of a military transport plane, watching Israel disappear beneath the clouds. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, and I could still smell sulfur in my clothes despite changing into clean fatigues. The Israeli colonel had debriefed me for an hour, asking the same questions over and over. What was it? Where did it come from? Were there more of them? I gave him the same answers every time. It was old, older than recorded history. It came from whatever existed before God created the world. And yes, there were definitely more of them. The plane touched down in Rome 18 hours later. Cardinal Whitmore was waiting for me at the airfield, along with 3 other cardinals I didn't recognize, and a woman in an expensive suit who looked like she'd stepped out of a government briefing room. "Dr. Sadie," she said, extending her hand. "I work for an organization that doesn't officially exist. We've been monitoring seismic activity around the globe since your encounter in Israel. And 14 separate locations have shown unusual underground movement in the past 24 hours, all of them near ancient sites, all of them deep enough to suggest something very large stirring below the surface. We drove through Rome in a convoy of black SUVs, but instead of heading to the Vatican, we went to another building that didn't appear on any map. This one was larger than the previous safe house, with multiple underground levels and what looked like a small army of priests, scholars, and military personnel. "Welcome to the real Vatican Special Division," Whitmore said as we descended in an elevator that went down at least 10 stories. "What you've been doing for the past 8 years was just the beginning, the minor threats, the creatures that were already awake and causing trouble." The elevator doors opened into a command center that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Wall-mounted screens showed seismic data from around the world, satellite feeds of ancient ruins, and what appeared to be theological research from every major religion on Earth. "The Leviathan you killed was a scout," Dr. Sadie said, pulling up a holographic display that showed the cave system beneath Israel. "It was testing humanity's defenses, seeing if we'd grown strong enough to be worth hunting. And apparently we have," Whitmore added, "because now the others are waking up." The holographic display shifted to show 14 different locations around the globe. Underground chambers beneath Stonehenge, caverns under the Egyptian pyramids, caves below Mayan temples in Central America, each one showing massive underground movement. "These are the Titans," Whitmore explained. "The powers that existed before creation. Your Bible calls them different names. Leviathan, Behemoth, Rahab, the Dragon of the Deep. Other religions have their own terms for them, but they're all the same thing. The old chaos, the primordial forces that God had to defeat to create an ordered world. And I just woke them up." "You did what you had to do," Dr. Sadie said. "If that Leviathan had reached the surface and fed on human civilization, it would have grown strong enough to wake the others anyway. At least this way we have some warning." One of the screens showed footage from what looked like a news broadcast. A reporter standing in front of Stonehenge, talking about unusual seismic activity and unexplained phenomena in the area. "We've got maybe 72 hours before the first of them breaks through to the surface," Whitmore said. 72 hours to assemble teams, gather weapons, and figure out how to kill things that were old when the pyramids were built. "What kind of teams?" "Hunters like you," Dr. Sadie replied. "We've been training them for decades, just in case this day ever came. Men and women from every major religion, all united by one common goal: keeping humanity alive." The elevator behind us opened again, and 6 people stepped out. A woman in military fatigues with Orthodox Christian crosses tattooed on her forearms. A man in Buddhist robes carrying what looked like a blessed assault rifle. A young guy with a Star of David pendant and enough weapons to outfit a small army. 3 others whose religious affiliations weren't immediately obvious, but who all had the look of people who'd seen combat and survived. "Meet your new team," Whitmore said. "Starting tomorrow, you'll be deployed to whichever site shows the most activity. Your job is the same as always: Kill things the Bible doesn't mention. I looked at the screens showing seismic data from around the world, at the holographic displays of ancient monsters stirring beneath the earth, at the team of hunters who looked just as tired and scared as I felt. So this is how the world ends, I said. Not with a bang, but with very old things waking up from very long naps. Maybe, Whitmore replied. Or maybe this is how the world finally learns to defend itself. You killed a Leviathan, Boone. One man, with faith and the right weapons, took down something that existed before human civilization. If you can do it once, you can do it again. The screens around us showed more news reports. Strange lights beneath the ocean near Easter Island. Unexplained tremors in the Amazon rainforest. Temperature spikes in caves beneath the Sahara Desert. The Titans were waking up, and humanity was about to face its oldest enemies. But I'd been hunting monsters for 8 years, and I was still alive. I had a team of trained killers from every major religion, weapons blessed by 7 different cardinals, and the backing of an organization that had been preparing for this war since before I was born. The old powers wanted to reclaim their world. They were welcome to try. I was trained by the Vatican to kill things the Bible doesn't mention, and business was about to get very, very good. When do we start? I asked. Cardinal Whitmore smiled, and for the first time since I'd known him, it was a smile full of anticipation rather than worry. We already have,